Okay, so this is Sunday Sangha. I really like that we can do this every week. Uh, it's kind of the highlight of my week, in fact, or it's the only thing on the calendar, in fact. and uh, and so I'm really glad. And you've asked a question that needs a detailed answer, at least in the point of how it fits into the teachings of the Buddha. And that we can also understand that words like perception, consciousness, and even things as weird as colors. Are you sure when you use the word perception that you're talking about the same thing that I'm talking about when I use the word perception or consciousness? Or even do we even have our own definitions of these words change around? And an example of that is, are you very, very sure that when you see something green and I see the same object, that I see the same colors that you do?
Not even that. Maybe
Exactly, because you
my
don't.
green is your windy.
Well, the point is that right now we don't have any sophisticated equipment enough to know what registers different. All we know is that the light that's in the air is the same, striking the eyes. But once it hits the eyes, where do things begin to diverge in unique individual consciousness? All right, and they've got a whole lot of examples of this kind of thing, and Escher was famous for it. Have you ever heard of Escher?
Could you repeat
He
the
was
name
an
again?
artist that would draw stairs that looked like that they were all of a sudden going upside down, or um, birds that became and not became based upon the shadows and the light, or the absence of form. Um, Also, there is an example of two Vas sitting together, except that many people don't see two Vas. They see two faces looking at each other because they see the faces in the absence of the Vas. And then there's the example of the old woman who is also a young chick, depending upon this thing that's out there. Do you see that as a chin or a nose? And then there's other examples that you'll find of where the frame of the window is all that you see on display, and it is intentionally warped to give the perception that it's at an angle. When you go around to see the front of it, it just gets a worse angle. It doesn't get better because the wood was, and then you recognize that you're looking at something and you thought was square, and so you intended for it to be square, where in fact it never was square.
So if I
Rectangle.
understand you correctly, it's not about just an optical illusion. It's about what's behind this.
Right. Well, it's not. Here's the point. It's not about the optical. It's the illusion. And which illusion are you going to take until you recognize that it was intended for both? But the artist intended it that way. He worked hard at it to fool you. Okay, so these are visual perceptual things. And guess what? There is a whole business of science around it that some people call propaganda, others call it news, other people call it them because they're liars and we're not. You know, that kind of thing that's going on. So, um, there's a thing here in this regard that we're talking about is confirmation bias. That we go around finding things that confirm what we already know to be true. Except that we often ignore the evidence that points out that it's not true. because we don't want to deal with it. We don't want to handle it. We don't want to open our mind. This is
First step
actually
into craziness.
Pardon?
A first step into craziness.
No, it's just a nice, crazy hole to wallow in for a while. And that, in fact, that's something that I can see is that the entire population of adults in the United States, almost all of them are wallowing in ignorance of one form or another much of the time. And some people do it nonstop. Okay, and it's really crazy. How could people so by the millions fall into a cult? Or how can even a few people fall into a cult? Okay, the answer is it has to do with the sophistication of the propaganda. It has to do with how the lies are fashioned to get you to think that this thing is square, when in fact it's quite crooked.
But where is the anchor point? Because if so many people are prone to this sophisticatedness, I mean, I don't really think it's sophisticated, or I at least have the impression it's
on
not that
various
sophisticated.
levels. It's on many, many, many levels. There's various ways in doing it. Okay, but in fact, I wouldn't even go so far as to say it's a rainbow, because a rainbow is still one dimensional, but it's at least 2 or 3 dimensional. And so it's very, very complicated about how bad the lies could be, or not, or sneaky, or whatever like that. And the way of talking about it is that the truth is actually quite small. It's real. It's confirmable. But a lie, you lie about it, and you can say all kinds of things. Be all over the place. An example of that is asking anybody, an individual on the Skype here, how old you are, and people will hem and haw around, and so somebody will finally come up and say 27. Then I says, okay, now I ask you again, lie to me. Now where can you go? You can go all over the place. You can start with, oh, I'm ageless. Or you can start with, I'm an infant. But there's no end to the number of lies that you can tell just about this one question of how old you are. That in fact, one within a year may not be an actual thing. They actually want a birth date. But then you go to the astrologer, and that's not good enough. They want the exact hour that you were born and also the location. Otherwise, their mathematics falls to crap. All right. So the point is, when I ask you how old you are, you can't tell me the truth. Well, I probably couldn't handle the truth because I'm not an astrologer. I don't care, and they don't either.
Most Western people have a problem if someone from, let's say, Africa or somewhere else doesn't know how old they are.
Yeah, I don't know. That's another answer. Or somewhere between data and data. Or the other answer is, I'm going to tell you how old I am, but I'm actually lying to you. But at least I answered your question. Which is like on the internet. Don't ever put your exact date of birth. Always lie to them. Why? Because then you're hard to locate among all the other lies. But if you tell them the truth, they got you. Spot on. All right. So this is kind of an introduction to the Dhamma now. Is the perception has to be developed as a skill. And the skill is, are we going to continue to use fresh information and keep looking and investigating? Or are we going to go dig up some garbage that we thought was true and put that into the mix? Okay, can you stay in the here now? And when does perception pick up all this sankhāra? Okay, we're actually now talking specifically at one level of paticcasamuppāda. Talking about step 2, yeah, and 4 in combination together.
Volitional formation, and what is like?
It is called nāmarūpa, and the word that we're using, perception, is translated. Oh my goodness, I don't know why. But the original word nāmarūpa, if you understand it correctly, that means that our perception is to bring something in and make sense out of it. The reality is the rupa, and what we do with it, perception, is turn it in and name it, understand it, get a hold of it, make it mine. Oh, wait a minute now. But that's what we kind of do, you see. And our perception then, the outcome, actually, the perception itself is a process, and the outcome of it is then an idea or a concept. And that concept then in the Pali is the salāyatana. It's the internal sense thing that we came up with. When we saw that thing out there, we turned around and got something out of the past and painted it red or whatever we wanted to do. And then we say, aha, look at this. I know what that thing out there is. What we've got in mind has nothing to do with what we saw with our eyes. Or maybe it's close enough that we can't distinguish the difference. Hear how far that is. I mean, it's always in that gap of perception. And that if we looked and looked and looked and looked and make sure that we were looking and inspecting it, then we would really be able to see it, especially when it's a moving target.
So familiarity, even familiarity with the own mind, is not enough because it's getting solidified over time. The data changes.
Right. But how solidified that stone is, a Michelangelo with a chip and a hammer can come by and carve some interesting curves into that thing, make something out of it. All right, that's what humans do anyway. We're the ones who make the connections. Dogs can't see things the way that we do, but we can't smell things the way they do. And I think they got one up on us on that one. They don't remember things very long. You can beat a dog in the morning and he'll come back and lick your face in the afternoon. You can beat your brother and he will hate you for the rest of both of your lives. Why?
So
Because every time we see the person, we can't see him new like he is right now. We have to remember what happened in the past. And that becomes part of our perception. The brother is no longer a brother now that he's hit me. Now he's an enemy. And we keep grasping this enemy on him every time. Even if he really wants to be brother and wants to be friend, we still see him as an enemy. I mean, how many families does this happen in?
So are we just operating in the world, Lokija or Lokija, and then there is the Dhamma?
Ignorantly in the world, without having any lokavitu, no knowledge of the world, no being able to see it. In fact, the V2 is really strange because we get the word video out of that same word that the Pali has, of looking, seeing, vidu. Take a video. Remember, in fact, this is part of the quality of it is that if you Watch what you're doing. When you set down your keys, you will remember exactly where they were, and they'll be there when you go back, or something happened.
If you
But most people
always
will not
put them
remember
there.
where they put things. Right. That's another example of it, is organization. We're actually learning how to organize our mind based upon things that we know are square, rather than bringing perceptually distorted things in and live in that kind of existence.
What an OS? Operation
OS.
system.
Ah, exactly. Where in fact, police have the word for it, an MO, a method of operation. Okay. Operation we do in the present moment. The method is the old patterns of the mind that every time we see the present moment, we perceive it through the old patterns of the mind. And that's what gives criminals a method of operation, which makes them easier to track down. Because they leave prints, all kinds of different prints, not fingerprints, but I mean, there's all kinds of imprinting that happens at a good sleuth. In fact, there are the stories about such people who can pin down that stuff are legend. Two examples are Sherlock Holmes and Monk, who was a television series. And in fact, on Monk, they had a song that they had at the beginning of it, and the song was "It's a Jungle Out There," because that's how he saw things. He saw everything as a jungle. He had, like phobias of all kinds. But what that made him was an absolute excellent sleuth, an absolute excellent detective. And in regard to that, he was fired from the police because he was nuts. But every episode, they'd have some new thing that they needed his help on, and he'd come in and tinker on things, and he'd figure out what happens. Okay. It's the way that we look at things, and that's what I'm talking about literally. It's the investigation. To know how to look and to know what to look for is the map of paticcasamuppāda. And the enthusiasm is coming from the fact that you're practicing correctly enough to get the mind cleaned out enough so that you can watch it work when it's working correctly. Because if it's not working correctly and you keep coming up with strange perception results over and over again, you look at it, and every time you look at it, it's different, then you wind up in confusion. And that's what confusion is really all about, is the evidence doesn't match what I've been told. And the Buddha's answer to that is, yeah, see the difference between what you've been told and what you can see right here, right now. And start piling that evidence up and throw the old garbage away. And
So
that's how we
paticas
begin to change our perception, by changing actually the salāyatana. Which garbage pile are we going to get our base out of? A wholesome one?
paticcasamuppāda and the Eightfold Noble Path, or the 4 items we mostly use.
Right. In fact, the beauty of this paticcasamuppāda that we're talking about at this deep level is actually the second noble truth, expanded. It's an expanded version of the second noble truth. If you know about the second noble truth, Mara's 3 daughters are moha, lobha, dosa, greed, ill will, and delusion. Greed, ill will. We've had this conversation before, haven't we, Marcus? Right. So these 3 things are the cause of suffering, cause of dukkha, the causes of dukkha, and that these things are the result. We start with ignorance, we pile on a bunch of old feelings, and we wind up in dukkha. What feelings do we have? Liking and wanting things, or ignorantly not liking things and wanting to get rid of them. But we still keep the ignorance because everything is based in ignorance until you start paying attention. And then you can see, and you're not in the deep dark past of all the lies that you've been told, all the propaganda that you learned, all the crooked joints that you were told that, oh, it is square. You're just looking at it from an angle. Right? That's how cults are built. Oh, you need to get your perception so that you can see that this window that we've got is actually straight.
So this is the biggest, or this is the
It's doing it over and
center of
over
the
again. It's not a
complexity.
biggie. It's not a biggie. It's a new habit. It's a new pattern. It's a
It's the
new
center of
way
the
of looking,
complexity. It's
and
the center
continue
of the
to look.
complexity.
I'm sorry, what?
It's the center of the complexity. Because if I remember correctly, delusion is one of the last three fetters you abandon before becoming an arhat. So this is
Yes,
a
but you
very
abandon it as a
deep
fetter.
thing.
That doesn't mean you're all knowing. That doesn't place you up there in a satellite with extra super duper goggles or something.
Exactly.
All right. In fact, the real better is ignorance in the sense of I don't know enough. I need more. I need more. It's a need, and it has a fear base to it. But when you come to the point that you know enough that you're satisfied finally, you don't need any more. I mean, imagine going to a buffet where you've got all you can eat. There still comes a time when you don't want to eat it all. I mean, when you walk in there, you want to eat it all. But after 4 or 5 plates, I can't make it more than 4 or 5 full plates of food. I mean, I just can't do it anymore. There comes a limit to it all. Everything has limits to it. And so this is what we're talking about is just a little dab will do you over and over and over and over again. Don't make things big, make them interesting, continuing interesting. So look at where you're going. One of the little jokes is that Christianity is all about selling a plastic Jesus so that you put it on the dashboard of your truck to keep you from crashing into the tree. If you don't buy that plastic Jesus, you're going to crash your truck for sure. And the Buddha says, hang on, why don't you watch where you're going? That'll keep you from crashing into the tree. Oh, a lot of plastic Jesus get wound up on wrecked dashboards. All right, so that's the idea of big things. Also, people, we can. What is an artisan is someone who is skilled at doing something. It's not something that he is, and yet we do that with words like arhat as if it was something that somebody was, rather than something he's doing. He's arhating. It's easy as pie, you know. Just sit around and do nothing, and you're arhating all you need to do. Sometimes you feel like a nut, and sometimes you don't. We have to start watching all of this anicca to begin to see, because we've got human minds. And the best thing about a human mind that makes it so unique is that we can put things together. We do remember well enough so that we can see the connections. We can do things like learn an alphabet so that we always know that B comes after A. We don't ever get confused about that. We've seen it so many times over and over and over and over and over again. Okay. So in that way, we're now going to start paying attention to what's happening now, because learning the ABCs was something that we did in a state of trauma in in grade school or grammar school. And so we bring that kind of sankhāra back with us when I start talking about alphabets, is that we have feelings about alphabets. Some of us like alphabets and some of us hate alphabets. Why is that? Oh, well, depends upon the attitude that you formed when you were ignorant. And now that you recognize that alphabets don't really mean anything to me anymore, not really, then I can throw the whole thing out. So we begin to see how we feel, or we acknowledge how we feel about things. We keep doing that over and over and over again, and pretty soon we begin to clean out all of the sankhāra. And another way of talking about it is that every time that we have a negative thought, imagine that the thought has some sort of residual exhaust, like a fire has smoke, or the exhaust of a car. Even the electric cars have exhaust of some sort of or another at the power plant, wherever they came from. Or the solar panels had to be manufactured and there was a whole lot of waste. Okay, so there's always the trash to take out, the residual. The sankhāras is your own junkyard, your own residual pile of crap. And everyone is an emperor of our own pile of crap. The question is, are you going to be drowning under it? You're going to be clawing your way to the top, or are you going to sit on top of your world? Your choice based upon your attitude. And it doesn't have to do with the content of the quality of the heap of trash. It has to do with the change of attitude. Are you on top of your life, or are you buried under it? This is the sammasankappa, or in fact, there is, you heard me talk about that the teaching of the Buddha fits really, really tightly together. It's all just one little teaching, but we can expand it and look at the various fingers. All right. And so the whole point about this paticcasamuppāda is that it fits back into the way of the practice of the Eightfold Noble Path, that's where it's all about. And you see that Eightfold Noble Path recurring over and over and over and over and over again in various contexts. One of the examples of it is the 7 factors of enlightenment. Well, what the factors of enlightenment are is unremitting sati, unremitting mindfulness, unremitting investigation. Here we go again. This is the Eightfold Noble Path. It's just the fulfillment of the path. The next one is unremitting energy. Why? Because our right effort became really easy because we're really good at this. Like a skilled craftsman. Let's say a skilled bricklayer. For him, the bricks aren't heavy. And all it has to do is tap it a couple of times and it's precisely where it needs to be. But the new guy hasn't practiced at bricklaying at all. And it's an effort for him, everything he does. Same is true with automobile mechanics or any other job that is a complex task. They're all like that. And this one, unfortunately, is the only real task that has no physical outside attributes other than the expression on your face. All of the other stuff that you do, whether it's learning to play football or playing a piano or a violin or carving wood or whatever skill that you're learning that requires this over and over again to it, has an output that other people can see. And we sort of get proud of that kind of stuff. And so we think, oh, well, I'll get pride if I can do this stuff on the inside. Nobody can see. They don't know what's going on in there. But also the other part of it is that you don't know what's going on in anybody else's mind either. All we can do is read the face, the postures, the smiles, the confusion, all of that is all we can do. And we can make inferences, but we still don't know why he's smiling and he's not. We don't know. We don't know what's in each other's mind, which means that there is no one who's going to do the right effort to fix this thing other than you. You're the only one who can see it if you will look. And this is what the second noble truth is all about, is taking full-on responsibility for our own dukkha. That we do it. We manufacture it. We skillfully make the blade of that knife, and then we very carefully, with strong force, intentionally stab ourselves in the back. And then we turn it around and stab ourselves in the throat. And then we stab ourselves in all kinds of metaphorical places. We just keep doing that over and over and over again. And the reason for it is because we've got all of this crap from the past. That's what we manufacture the new sword from. And guess what? You don't have, just because you've got sword parts staying in all of your garbage doesn't mean you've got to use sword parts now to manufacture whatever the moment is. That we can go find better stuff rather than that old crap that we got in there. Bad feelings that we had when we were really ignorant, because now we're going to be wise. Why? Because we're looking at what's going on. And when you see and recognize that what you see is what is happening, or as they say, what you see is what you get. And when you understand that what you see is what you get, you'll start longing for things that you don't see. That it's all in the mind. Anything you see that's not right in front of you, you don't get it. And we're going around wanting things that we don't have, out of sight, and we don't keep it out of mind. We bring that into our mind and then say, I want it, and then we feel bad. So there's all kinds of things that we have in that sewer. I call it a sewer. We want come clean out the cesspool, or the what do they call it? Not a cesspool, but a septic tank. That's what they call it. And every new moment, we throw down our own toilet into the past, which means that the new moments become a kind of a toilet also. It too rots and becomes sewage. You threw a hamburger down the toilet, it's not going to stay hamburger for long. It's going to wind up being sewage. You wouldn't want to eat it again after it's in the sewer. Right? It's in the past. It's dead. Until we recognize, wait a minute, I can start layering the whole sewer with new hamburgers. They float. If I'm very careful and watch things, I can keep piling new wholesome thoughts on top of the past. And pretty soon, every time that I step into the sewer, I just walk on hamburgers. That you can, in fact, have enough wholesome thoughts over and over and over again that every time your perception is needed to go get some raw material, you're going to get some really wholesome, good stuff. A warm fuzzy rather than a cold prickly, or whatever the expression is. But it's our choice to recognize that it takes over and over and over again to start layering things down so that we don't go back in the deep dark past. That's at best just informational, but it's not something to base any present decisions on, feelings, or anything on. It's just old stuff. Where this present moment is good stuff. Check it out. I really invite you to check out how nice things are right here, right now, wherever you are. Recognize it. I mean, even in a library, you are safely quiet. What a relaxation that is. No place to go and nothing to do, and I can just be here and everything's hunky dory. Life is good, I've heard them say. It was Mel Brooks who said, it's good to be king. But in a way, remember, you are the king. You're the king of your own house. You've got a castle here. And if king ain't good enough, be your own god. I mean, this is your whole world. Be a champion in your whole world. Be in charge of your world rather than being a victim of it. You're the one who runs this place. And how do we get into that state of being? This is actually the word in Pali is Shraddha, that is wrongly translated into the word faith. Shraddha is not faith. Shraddha is the confidence of over and over and over and over again, putting in the coin and getting the gold bar out. Over and over and over again, you wind up being a winner every moment. And everybody around you is a winner also. So when we have that kind of attitude, the words or the descriptions or the namas that we're adding to this rupa, I'm talking about a rupa here, a real experience of a feeling of, wow, I've got it. I'm the boss here. I'm the king. I'm the emperor of this pile of shit. And we have to be able to get that. That's the full-on pity. The realization of that comes with that confidence of being a winner. So we've seen that now Anapanasati Sutta is fitting directly in with first jhana, which is fitting directly into the 5 faculties, which is closely directly related to the Eightfold Noble Path, which we've been getting to get this. So where does that connection come from? The 5 faculties start with confidence, which is just another word for the sammasankappa. Getting our confidence, getting our mojo, understanding that I can clean out my mind. Never mind that it keeps coming back over and over again. Out it goes again. And if it comes in and takes a while, and I've let it come in, and then I recognize I don't like it, well, throw it out now. Don't worry about, oh, I let it in and stayed for 5 or 10 minutes. Well, it was okay then, but it's not now because I can see it and out it goes. We keep doing that. We keep putting that nickel in and we keep getting the gold bar. Wow, free them again. Free at last. Don't have to worry about it anymore. So the other aggregates of that, the Shraddha, sorry, I keep using the Sanskrit word. It's actually Sada in the Pali. Shraddha is a Hindi. In fact, I knew a Ma Shraddha. She's a good friend of mine way back when, and so I can't shut my mouth and say the Pali word correctly. So forgive me, I use the word Shraddha. But that's the confidence. Okay? In fact, Ma Shraddha actually lived up to her name. This was the name that she was given, and that's often done in Asia, is that they give you the name that you need to do. That's your goal, is to live up to your name. So if you get a name like Dhamma V2, that means you've got to see and know the Dhamma. Dhammarato means you've got to enjoy the heck out of Dhamma. It's delightful. Every minute is delightful. I sell delight. It's free of charge. Have a few. And so Sankhāra is another name like that. And notice that I'm talking about just the names of what's so and mo. Guess what? This is not magic. This is what the old monks can see in somebody and see their potential. And is to be developed. This is one of the values of a spiritual name. Why? Because you actually are now taking control of that nāmarūpa. And you're taking this raw diamond and giving it a polish, giving it a name. That happens to each one of us as we become this champion inside. The lion. Buddha was known to be a lion. He was also known to be a bull, but in fact, in the Pali, it's not bull in the sense that we think of bull. It's a bull elephant. Bigger than these cow things. I mean, a bull elephant is something. And so that was what he was named. The 2 top dudes in the forest were the 2 names that he wore. So when we get that, we have to also balance it with the other things, which has to do with Sati, investigation, and the effort is, let us say, directed in the sense of outgoing metta. And so this is the path. This is, in fact, back to the Eightfold Noble Path, which is the same thing as the seven factors of enlightenment, which in this case, the five faculties, really helps us to tie this together about how important it is to change our perception so that we wind up coming out of the past, ever how short a past it is now, a champion smelling like hamburgers, as opposed to a victim smelling like it just got out of the sewer. Because that's what we do. I mean, it's your choice, moment by moment by moment. And so this is actually the paticcasamuppāda that we've been talking about, which is starting with ignorance. We begin to pile on things and they rot, and we keep piling on, thinking that our past is valuable. And we keep messing with it and bringing it up and using it and all that kind of stuff, when in fact it's just an old pile of shit. And what we need to do is to start looking at what's going on right here, right now. And this is how we use perception, as we keep going from consciousness perception, look and see, rather than look and mull. It's the mulling that we do. Mulling things over means we're going back into the past and trying to make sense out of it, what's happening now with what we knew from the past. An example of that is that the charlatan's trying to sell you something. Instead of trying to figure out from all you know about what's happened in the past, better thing to do is to watch closely what he's doing. Because if he's a charlatan, he will tip his hand soon enough. So this is the whole quality then of this here now. And we want to practice that as a skill. And the skill is Sati. To practice the skill of Sati, to remember, to wake up and look. To remember, to wake up and look. Remember, to wake up and look. And if you look and see this sequence and begin to say, wait a minute, something stinks here. Now we take the right effort to sweep it out. Let's go do something else with the mind. I think about Dhamma. Tell ourselves a joke. I think about how good it feels to take this breath. And if you don't think that this breath is great, just wait a couple of minutes, then take it and see how great this breath is. And just keep coming back to the here now, over and over and over and over. Build some layers on our sewer of precious, delightful moments. When you look into the past, look into the immediate past of how nice it's been, rather than into the deep past about how bad it was. There's another way of talking about it. And so in this regard, we're actually looking at perception as kind of something between two kinds of consciousness. One is the Pali word of vinaya, which we would translate into consciousness. But philosophers have a completely different version of what is consciousness. Okay, and that is the food after it's been cooked. So the raw meat is one kind of consciousness, and the cooked dinner is another kind of consciousness. I can say, I can see it. And it is something that I'm pointing at, like a tree. And then I can say, I see what you mean. Now, when I say I see what you mean, or I understand what you're getting at, that's actually talking about the meal that's been served, as opposed to what you actually hear, what you actually see. And the perception is the killing, the cooking, the dressing, the cooking, and the presentation of the meal. And then what we make of it is that end result, which is salāyatana. Yeah, it's beef, all right, but this beef that you've got's got very little to do with the beef that was out there on the hook. So the raw input data, the idea is to continue to take raw input data, more and more and more and more raw input data, rather than keep processing and keep killing everything. Just let it be. Just take in new data. Become a funnel for information that's coming to you by the tons in this present moment that most of us are completely ignoring because we're thinking about something in the head. We're not letting stuff in. We're perceiving about something that's not even here. So let's stop doing that and start paying attention to this present moment. You'll begin to see how nice this is, because thoughts that have to do with the past are dangerous. I can step right into cow pie in my mind anytime, and we're still slip on it and wind up being covered with it. And so we recognize, watch every step. Keep watching where we're going. Keep noticing this present moment. And how do we do that? Is by remember. Remember to look. Remember to look. Remember to look. And what we're actually doing is that we keep going back now to the senses. More and more mind moments spent in sensory input, and fewer mind moments spent in perception, and fewer still mind moments of eating the meal, and then even fewer mind moments of getting sick and throw up about the meal we just ate. Gosh, that's an interesting description of the paticcasamuppāda just right there. That's an interesting process. Just keep looking at the cows. Don't go through the process of killing them and preparing them and then eating them and feeling bad about it, then eating and being sick, which is very dissatisfying. So this is paticcasamuppāda, and it's good for us to see not only this as a sequence that I've taught you in forward order this way, but we begin to wake up to see it happening in reverse. Why? Because we're slow. So the first thing we wake up and notice is that I am really sick over what I ate yesterday. And then next time it happens, you wake up while you're heaving. And then the next time you wake up to the taste of it and recognize that this is poison, and you throw it out. And this is where we practice anapanasati. That's the beginning point of don't chew on the poison. Recognize that this thought is unwholesome and spit it back out. Don't eat it. Devour more of it. This meal is poison. Why? Because it was cooked in the sewer. That's why. So we have to be mindful of the things that we chew on. We have to recognize, is this poison? Or is this merely delicious and not good for me? Or is this really okay and I can really enjoy it happily? Is it dangerous right now? Is it going to be dangerous later? Or am I going to be free from any danger and just enjoy the meal? So you're your own cook. You're your own emperor. You're the one who's manufacturing all of this perception things. And I'm right there when I said that, I'm actually talking about the distinction between the cooking process and the cooked food. So that which is perceived because of the process of perception or perceiving. And so we make a process into a noun. And often it's preconceived. That means that we got it out of the garbage. In other words, we automatically just jumped to that conclusion. We didn't even bother to look to see what was going on. We already know what's going on. We preconceived. We already know what it is. That's preconceived, which is also what we were referring to earlier of confirmation bias. Okay, like, oh, it tastes so good, I don't have to worry about that it smells like almonds. I'm going to go ahead and eat it anyway. What is it? Does anybody know what is it that smells like almonds?
Cyanide.
Cyanide, right? That's it. So we have to start to wake up and look at what we're eating on. What is our mind chewing on? Is it poison? Is it unwholesome? If it is, let's spit that out and find something better to chew on. So this is how we understand now at a different level. Remember that we went through the process of waking up the next day, waking up when we were sick. Now we're waking up at the point of testing the bite of food that we're at. Later in the process, which we've been also talking about today, is how did we prepare this? Where did the poison come from? Was the poison coming from the fact that the kitchen hadn't been cleaned after we poisoned somebody yesterday on drugs intentionally? Where did this come from? So that's when we begin to see this issue of how perception works. Because we do that perception in order to live in this society. You've got to do that perception. You can't walk around blithely just experiencing the here now. You walk right into traffic and wonder how beautiful that car is coming up so quickly. Bang. No, we actually need the fear. We need to have that old deep stuff there to process to keep us still alive. So we can't be there. In fact, there's I think it's the Badia or Badaya Sutta. It's in the ones in the Upadana, number 10, I think. You can check that if you want to, Marcus. But anyway, the Badaya Sutta is that this guy who is, I don't want to go through the whole story. He got the information from the Buddha that he wanted while the Buddha was out on Thendabat, and the Buddha didn't have time to explain to him, but he was already a deep practitioner. That afternoon, he was dead. Why? Because the Buddha gave him this simple teaching, and that is, let the seen be merely the seen. Let the heard be merely the heard. Let the cognized be merely cognized. That was the teaching he gave this guy, and it killed him that afternoon.
Is this the one with the cow?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's the one.
Okay.
Yeah, he did not understand the cow says don't come here. And he would have known that instinctively.
Right, similar to the car, right?
Yeah, he just left the cow as a cow. He didn't say cow, danger, 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 Will Robinson. He didn't do that. He just said cow.
So interesting that most people go from one delusion to another in this regard. It's so simple, but we are so prone to this conceptualization process.
Well, this is the whole quality then, is to wake up to this. Start watching what's going on. Recognizing that there is this thought needs to be inspected to see, is it poison or not? Is this an unwholesome thought? Where is this thing going? How sick am I going to get if I go down this rat hole? And so we throw it out. Then eat something that's more delicious. That's the first step. In fact, that we're talking about would be the first jhāna. that we're talking about, of tasting the food as we're eating it, is also what Bhikkhu Buddhadasa would say, making the mind fit for work, is because we're actually tasting what's happening in the moment. Even though we've got a mouthful of poison, we just recognize that, and out it comes. But we weren't well enough to keep out of the poison yet. But that's the process we go through. And that's what Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talks about, mindfulness at the point of contact. When that mental food, or the example we're having of that morsel, hits your mouth, hits your taste buds, what does it taste like? What kind of feelings are you going to have with this? Are they going to be wise feelings, or are they going to be ignorant feelings? If they're ignorant feelings, then we likely want to whoop it right down without really inspecting it. And so, wisdom at the point of contact. I saw the Sutta Central. What was the
Majjhima Nikaya 140?
Oh, it's repeated in the Majjhima Nikaya also.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. I was quoting the original. A lot of stuff that's in the Udana winds up in later literature. That's why we know it's so old. It's because its original teachings of the Buddha is just all over the place. All right. But if Bad Daddy had been in a place where he was wise enough to go into that state, then he could have left seeing as merely seeing and really gotten a big kick out of it, leaving hearing as just merely hearing, which is nothing but being in the here now. Not just those two senses, but we've got breathing and touching and sense contact and all kinds of stuff that's happening in this present moment if we don't pay attention to it, instead of trying to make sense out of it. Because how are we going to make sense out of this present moment? By digging into the past. So let's just enjoy this present moment, but you got to do that where you're safe, secluded, away from other people. You don't do it while you're out on walking meditation. Then there was cows. Nowadays there's traps. All kinds of ways to die when you're completely fearless. Why are we completely fearless? It's because the fear is part of the sankhāra. And it comes up and we process that cow or that car and we're afraid. And so we don't step into traffic. But if you leave the scene as merely the scene, it's just a beautiful car. Here it comes. I know this for a fact because I've been there, done that. That car came so close it didn't whip my robe, and he was still going. It just split. Didn't slow down, and I didn't speed up. It was right in front of the water about 11 o'clock at night. And I was almost a messy robe. But that's happened. That's how I did. I wasn't afraid of the car. I knew he wasn't going to hit me. But he came so close that it hit the robe right behind me.
And if people see this in your posture, in your face, etc., it disturbs them so much. It's easier to act human. It's easier to act human.
About what you feel. That's right. Arhats say they don't care. They're all right.
What would we say about craving for like longer time in seclusion? Is that like kind of avoiding of actual practice? Because you actually do get like real practice in life, but then seclusion is just like dropping out and getting a feel for yourself again.
Well, remember that this longing, first off, is not a longing in the sense of a feeling. The first of it is a longing as a thought. Like, gee, wouldn't it be nice if? Which is a kind of a whataboutism. rather than Sati is to wake up right now and have that moment right now. Take that deep breath and says, well, I'm really glad I remembered that everything is okay. I don't have to long for seclusion. I'm in it. I'm wallowing. But see, the sankhāra that you're carrying around is you're not supposed to do it now. This is not the time or the place. And the answer to that is, if you're safe, it's the time to do it and the place to do it. And if you're not safe, go get yourself safe. And then use that safety as part of your training to keep recognizing, hey, I'm so safe. Now can't nothing touch me. I'm so safe. That brings you back to being the emperor again. Go ahead.
Yeah, I see that I can find like safety moments in my day-to-day operations, even without having to move myself out of like situations with people who can still come back to that safety. But I was thinking in the terms of like practice-wise, with like longer periods of seclusion as seeing, I guess it's a delusion of it, of like, oh, it can benefit to your practice, even though I never seen like benefit from long seclusion before.
All right. If you can remember this thought, and that is, oh, if I can take a deep breath and relax and feel good right now, then I'm satisfied right now. I don't have to worry about getting satisfied in the future. I'm satisfied right now. And the whole idea of a long retreat is hoping to get more and more satisfaction the longer you're sitting there. No, you're not getting more satisfaction, more and more of it. You're just having it right now, wherever you are, whether you're on retreat or not, when you remember, because you can go off on a retreat and have a real pity party. A lot of people do. You'd be surprised at how many dead corpses there are in the woods. You can't blame the bears for all of it. So it's not about the retreat. It's about how do you remember this moment? Come on, wakey, wakey. This is it. This is all we've got is right here, right now. Just take a deep breath and be back here. We don't have to keep perceiving and making sense out of everything. Just let it be, in the sense of just consciousness, without having to turn it from the reality that it is into something we know and understand, the Dhamma. That's the real teaching. Guess what? When you are doing that and paying attention specifically to the consciousness, that's part of the fourth jhāna. And we flicker in and out of the fourth jhāna on a regular basis without even knowing about it. But we can train through the first jhāna. If we can train to get in and maintain the first jhāna, then when we start to go up into the higher jhanas, which means now, I am not just tasting the food. I'm out there with the cow. Because it's not a far jump. It's not a big jump. Once we can control and operate with the first jhāna, then in fact the suttas even talk about it like that there are skills to be developed with the first jhāna. But those kind of suttas don't have second cousins about the second, third, and fourth jhāna. They're just merely described. The real action is getting the mind to the point that you can taste the food that you're eating, to be in the present moment, because everything else is just about the present moment. So if you can taste what you're eating, then you can expect what it is that you're that's been cooked. Then you can inspect the cooking, and then you can recognize, I don't have to kill this cow. And I can just be here in nature. Open nature, open sky, beautiful paradise. I don't even have to understand it. So that's that 10th better that you were talking about, the ignorance. I don't have to understand this to enjoy it. A lot of people think, oh, I get over and ignorance by knowing everything. And if I know everything, then I don't have any issues with ignorance. No, I'm not going to know everything, but I still don't have any issues with ignorance. It's okay, I don't know. In fact, when you're just in this state of consciousness, there is nothing to know. It's just to be seen, experienced, without knowing anything. You're not responsible for having to know all about it. That's what our culture teaches. You got to know. And the teachings of the Buddha is all about you have to only know enough, just enough to be happy, by seeing how we make ourselves unhappy. And then stop it. And so now we've got several places. We can stop when we're dead sick. We can stop when we're heaving. We can stop when we're chewing. We can stop the preparation of the food. And then we can stop killing the cow. This is paticcasamuppāda backwards. That's why it's in the sutras forward and backwards. It's because we understand it forward and then we begin to practice it backwards. And smack dab there at the deepest part of the practice is perception. What are we going to do with it? Can we turn it off? Can we connect it correctly? Can we have just enough perception so that we know that we know? That's all that we know. I mean, not knowing in the sense of know all about it, but know that we are awake. This happens when you wake up in the morning. The first thing that happens is you wake up and then you perceive that you've woken up. Just enough perception to know that you're awake now. In the Pali, they talk about it as neither perception nor non-perception. The example in the sutras, or actually in the Visuddhimagga, is a clay bowl that has had oil in it, but it's empty now to the point you can't pour any oil out. But you can rub your fingers around the bowl and still have oil. Because the oil seeps and saturates right into the bowl itself. And in that regard, we say, yes, perception seeps right into perception into consciousness. And we're going to be able to see and understand that. But then we don't have to do anything else with perception. We don't need a whole bowl full of oil at all. We just see we've got a bowl of that's empty. So that's that analogy about these states that we have that we can go into when we're beginning to play with and experience. Okay, another one is the perception that the boundaries that we used to feel don't exist anymore. This is what's called infinite space, except that the word infinite is the absolute wrongest word that Bhikkhu Bodhi could have chosen. It's not infinite. In fact, the Buddha didn't even have the concept of infinite.
Boundless.
Infinite's a concept. Boundless. What does that mean? It means, where do I end and where does the wind begin? The answer to that is that I'm full of hot air. I am the wind. Begin to see that we're boundless. There's no boundaries there. That the boundaries are all a way of perceiving. And the same way with boundless consciousness. What does that mean? That means that now it's no longer bound to perception, which is one of the early stages of jhāna, is that you no longer bind it. And that's when you have the concept of both boundless consciousness and nothingness. Until you take a little bit deeper level, and then you see this in-between thing there, this killing and cooking of the food. What? Go ahead.
Is a boundless state is the boundless state more natural, so to say, in the sense it's before the perception, like it's before delusions that we are boundless, and then perception comes along and kind of bounds us to, you know, then we have a sense of a sense.
To be honest with you, both the suttas and reality of individuals don't do it in all the same order there. That in fact, the order that's listed in one sutta is different than the order that's listed in another. And I'll give you the two examples, 119 and 111. They're listed in different orders. Not only that, but 119 has only 8 jhanas, to where sutta number 111 has 9. And the distinction and the important point is neither perception nor feelings. That's how it's described with Sariputta. That's the end of it. The end of it is that you absolutely know that all your feelings come from your perception. And if you don't have perception, you don't have feelings. In other words, if you didn't cook that meal, you don't eat. You don't get sick. And so the end of perception is the end of it. Now, when I say end of it, doesn't mean that now somebody who's had some whoop-de-doo experience is now an arhat. No, this is what we mean by, in the sense that we understand how the mind works. So then you can do with it what you want to do with it. Because you understand it at all its functioning parts, and you polish them off and put your little gearbox back together again, and it's humming right along now. Not mucked up and missing gear teeth and all the kinds of stuff that we normally have in our gearbox. We cleaned our own clock. And seeing how it operates, taking the gears out, removing the gear from perception to consciousness, and see how they're interconnected. And then see how the perception is the driving force that gives all the ticking and talking that we do. The reason for that is because, guess what? We're all wound up. So much for the clock metaphor. But it's all a matter of cleaning your clock, seeing all the parts, seeing all the gears, cleaning house, putting things back into correct order is the word samādhi. It's wrongly translated in the suttas in the English language by calling it concentration. And I show you the difference between an alarm clock that's been properly put together, properly oiled, and properly wound up, and everything is ticking along, versus that same alarm clock that somebody takes a sledgehammer to concentrate it. And guess what? Those concentrated clocks generally go to meditation retreats, hoping that somehow they can get unwound. Or in fact, their whole gearbox is all messed up, and they need to take the darn thing apart, put it back together again correctly, which is what we're doing here. And the biggest number one skill that we need is that being in that state of first jhana, which means we can continue to apply and sustain that wholesome thought. Continue to eat only wholesome food. That's the way to go. Continue to eat wholesome food over and over and over again, and pretty soon you begin to see how that wholesome food was made and what it came from and where it was. But so long as it's unwholesome food and you keep getting poisoned, you can't tell what happened. So this is the point then of why perception is so important, is that we're actually in first jhana looking at this moment. What's in it? What's going on? Do I really have to think about that email that I don't want to write? Oh, I don't have to think about it at all. In fact, if I stop thinking about it altogether, they may not even send me an invoice again. So it doesn't matter. This is the way of practicing the teachings of the Buddha, getting into the first jhana, getting the mind to the point that we got one wholesome thought after another, after another, after another. And now we can begin to investigate other things, like how good we feel. And what is feeling? And how did I feel this good? This is the wholesome food that we're feeling, or that we're feeding ourselves. And the results is we feel good. We like it. Delicious. Life becomes delicious. So we want to go see, how did that happen? It used to be a bunch of garbage. Now it's delicious. And so that's when we go in and start understanding this quality of perception and how we have already been changing our sewer. Now we begin to see how that sewer that we've changed now into wholesome. Still, we need to draw upon that past, that perception. In order to live in our society, we need to have that perception. Let's make sure that we're drawing upon wholesome past rather than unwholesome past. Or the visualization is now your whole sewer is covered in 10 feet deep of fresh hamburgers. No sewer can be found. So that's the kind of sankhāra to have. Maybe I should use the word donuts. Hamburgers came to mind one time, and so I've been keeping the students going with their hamburgers instead of sewage. Having wholesome thoughts rather than poisonous.
Delicious on the outside and inside empty.
Empty, exactly, empty calories. Well, guys, does anybody have any comments about this? Did we cover perception well enough? Everybody's got their mic muted. Marcus, you have anything to say? Everybody's got a thumbs up. I got that. Okay. All right. Well, guys, what do we do now? Nothing. So we'll finish. We'll see you later. Thanks, Scott. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot, guys. This has been great.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
See you guys.
See you guys. Thank you. Bye.